There is no shortage of weapon materials in Elden Ring. With how important it is to the story, gold alone comes in many varieties in the lands between. Considering all of the materials we have to work with, let's start with defining a material in the context of the challenge. Aside from things we'd usually call materials like wood and stone, I'm very lenient with what I consider to be a material, so it can include things like gravity, storms, or simply force itself, as all these things can be manipulated in-universe in Elden Ring. The material in question will be whatever the weapon I'm using is made of, whether it's a real thing or a fictional element. For example, if I'm using the stone club, the material would be stone. If I'm using poison mist, the material is poison, and so on. Keep in mind that I'm only counting the part of the weapon actually doing damage to the boss, so if I'm using a sacred seal made out of gold, the material in that case would only be gold if I were using the seal itself to attack. For every boss we fight, we must use a different material as a weapon. Because Elden Ring is so big, there are many repeat bosses, some of them in the main story. In these cases, I'm allowed to repeat materials. For example, if I use the golden halberd on Margit, I can use another gold weapon on Morgott. This only applies to main story bosses and remembrance bosses. Minor dungeon bosses and most field bosses don't have to be fought with a different material, and I'm free to use materials I've already used to backtrack through parts of the world if needed. With all of the rules covered, we can get ready to find our first weapon material. The first thing I want to do is get the 30-minute setup portion out of the way, so off we go to the transporter trap to get to Caelid the fast way. While we're here, we may as well rest at a grace to unlock Round Table Hold to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. The main thing I want to do is get the right half of the Dectus Medallion, and of course Radahnn's Sword Seal. As I do this, I also collect any sacred tears or crimson seeds I find along the way. I don't feel the need to show all of the upgrades on camera though. Once the setup portion of the run is out of the way, I make my way to the lift to get my first weapon material from the Altus Plateau. Since the first boss I'll fight is Margit, I need to take into consideration the fact that I'll have to fight him again with the same material I choose this time, so I want to make sure I pick something that gives me a lot of options. I don't want to pick something too rare. I figured using bone would be a safe bet, and the first weapon I want to use for this is the Celebrant's Skull we can pick up here in the Windmill Village. I'm pretty sure the Vagabond already has the stats to two-hand it, but if not, the Sword Seal will cover it. It's just Margit, so I'll use it as is, and not worry about doing any upgrades on it. I will say, after not playing this for almost a year, it's quite an adjustment when coming back from Dark Souls. I'm not used to these 7-hit delayed combos anymore, so I reverted to panic roll mode. Thankfully, a Great Hammer is just what someone like me needs. I can spam heavy attacks to easily stagger him, and deny him the ability to do the combos in the first place. That Iron Golem run I did may have had a slight impact on my playstyle. With Margit defeated, we have another talisman pouch and plenty of souls to dump into our vigor. With all the stat boosting equipment in this game for the other stuff, I would like to focus on vigor and endurance in the early stages of the run. While on the topic of stats, we should start discussing the next boss and, in turn, the next weapon material. I want to have Rellana available as soon as possible due to the nature of the run. Obviously, we'll be switching weapons constantly, so we'll also need to switch around our build quite a bit as well. But before we can fight her, we need to fight her guard dog. For that, I want a material that isn't too terrible, but also not something that I feel would be wasted on that boss. I ended up choosing wood since it's a fairly simple material. I think it's better to keep things simple while we're still starting out. The large club stays consistent throughout all the games. It's always the same old big stick of wood. You can't improve on perfection. Well, maybe we can improve it a little. That's what Hugh's for. Now that I've had some time to get used to the club, I feel better about challenging the Red Wolf. I'm going to prioritize staggering it with heavy and jump attacks. A crude instrument like the large club demands an equally crude fighting style. The boss has to find natural openings in my swings to attack, not the other way around. When I finally got the stagger, it hardly mattered anymore. Just one more combo and the wolf was dead. Hey, the fight may have been sloppy, but at least I didn't die to it this time. Moving on, I'm going back to Castle Morn to get the next material. Near the end of the castle, we can find a humble whip. As is the case in all the other games, the basic whip is made of leather. Just for good measure, I'll get my vigor to 30, then upgrade the whip to +9 before fighting Rellana. Moongrum, the Parian Knight, cowers in fear when confronted with his worst nightmare, leaving the path to Rellana unguarded. The whip will have to do a lot of work here, even at +9. The first phase lasted for 3 tedious cycles, but once it's done, our victory is already guaranteed. I know I'm bad at the game, but this is a new low. After stalling out every summon she has, I finally catch up to her, quickly finishing the fight before anything else can go wrong. Alright, let's start preparing for the next Shardbearer. I was thinking about another material I wouldn't mind throwing away on a boss like Godrick, and settled with brass, seeing as I already got the brass shield from a random drop earlier. Shields in Elden Ring aren't necessarily a setback. Some of them are just as good as standard melee weapons, especially if you equip them with a decent Ash of War. It took longer than I'd like to admit, but after lots of quit-outs, I finally got the Shield Crash skill from the Scarab and the Luke's Ruins. I also took out the Demi-Human Queen for the Ritual Sword Talisman before returning to Roundtable Hold to upgrade my shield. And I almost forgot the most important part. Thankfully we can do this at a site of grace. Shield Crash is really useful for small humanoid enemies like the ones in Stormvale. Once it connects, they lack the poise to do anything about it. I wish Godrick were as easy to stagger as they are. Maybe it would have been better to swap the materials I used for him and Rellana since she's so easy to stagger. Oh well, too late now. I don't know which would be more humiliating for him, the whip or the shield. Either way, it can't be any worse than the humiliation he already faced at the hands of Malenia. Still, the Shield Crash definitely hurts more when using a shield looted from his own soldiers. The tornado attack is the best time to use Shield Crash. I always make sure to stay kind of close to him because I don't want to accidentally trigger the long-range variant. This fight was honestly a lot of fun. I had plenty of opportunities to use Shield Crash, but even without it, it's pretty funny to jump over him and come back down bashing a shield in his face. After hitting him with one last crash, he yields to the shield at last, surrendering the Great Rune we came here for. On my way to activate it, I killed the golems for their halberds so we can use it for the next fight, whatever it may be. Godrick's Great Rune is the only one we'll be needing in this run. Having a free boost to all of our stats is too convenient to pass up. After the fight, I used the levels on Vigor and Endurance, hoping to outgrow the Sword Seal soon in favor of other talismans. We can get another slot though, so it's not a huge deal at the moment. While I considered going straight towards Leyndell after this, I decided I wanted to start Ranni's quest and do the Radahn festival instead. First off, we need to defeat Loretta, and like I said before, we'll be using the Golem's halberd for this. It's made of the same black stone as the golems who wield it, so of course, the material in this case is stone. This will be good for when we need to fight her again. Stone weapons aren't particularly hard to find. This also wasn't a particularly hard fight, but I shouldn't speak too soon since we haven't seen the last of her yet. Anyways, the festival should already be on since we went to Altus. Now all we need to do is find a new weapon material for Radahn. My first choice was the Venomous Fang, a fist weapon made of bronze. Normally I'm not that strict, but I do always say that the material should be the part I'm attacking with, and this weapon felt like a blatant violation since the Fang itself doesn't appear to be made of bronze. Luckily, this weapon forms a set with another bronze weapon we can get in another cave. After being led to Volcano Manor personally by Raya, I went back down the mountain to the Volcano Cave. Here, we can loot the Coil Shield. It's not going to be as good of a melee weapon as the Fang would be, but it is, without a doubt, entirely made of bronze, so it's the better choice for the challenge. It still inflicts poison just like the Fang does, and it has a cool snake attack. The Fang doesn't have that. The snake attack will inflict deadly poison in contrast to using the shield to attack as normal, which will cause the standard 90-second poison. I relied on the regular poison for Radahn and only used the skill to assist with poison buildup. Additionally, the skill itself, surprisingly, does a lot of physical damage to him, so I wanted to save my FP for when I really needed to use it. However, all of the standard attacks of the Coil Shield are pitiful damage-wise, so I need to be very patient and not aggress him until the poison runs out. All of my deaths in this fight happened because I tried to bite off more than I could chew. Once I make it to phase 2, I start relying on the Viper Bite more than before. This is because it can be harder to get him to stay put long enough to build up poison the other way, and by now he's built up quite a resistance to it. Viper Bite, however, can still poison him in a couple of hits, and we can use attacks like this one to our advantage to get in said hits. Apparently, if you take too long, he does his Metyr attack again in phase 2. I've never had that happen until now, so it took me by surprise. he escaped before I could do my usual stylish finish with a weapon skill, so I had to close this one out by unceremoniously spamming for my life the moment I saw an opening. That was quite the battle. We won't be able to send Radahn off for real just yet, but in the meantime, we can get a few more levels. I think I want to do one more thing before I go to Leyndell. To do it, I first need to get a new material here in Liurnia. The ivory sickle is self-explanatory, so we'll just take it and move on. This weapon is the weapon that I have consistently seen called the worst in the game for multiple reasons, but I've never used it with any of my builds, so now I can finally see for myself just how bad it is. Things are already going badly the second I equip it. I forgot about the Insha invasion, which means now I have no Great Rune equipped, so now I'm doing even less damage than I was to begin with. Normally this fight is so little of an issue that I don't even bother with things like dodging or healing, so I knew something was up when I died to this. It's definitely the weapon's fault, never mind the fact that I tried to break his poise with a dagger. I ended up getting the levels I needed to wield the sickle without Godrick's rune because of how long it was taking to do any damage to him. Now that he's finally dead, I can actually progress. As I mentioned, I want to do Ranni's quest in this run, so the first thing I need to do is kill the Metyr that guards the path to Nokrin. I don't hate myself enough to use the ivory sickle on a real boss. It's a joke of a weapon, so we might as well use it on a joke fight. The damage on both sides is so bad that there's no real threat of dying if you want to literally press nothing but the attack button the whole time. Even the crits are pathetic. Since this weapon would be too powerful otherwise, they had to make it one of the few daggers that doesn't have a crit bonus. And it's a somber weapon, so it has a very unique skill called Quick Step. I feel like this weapon is the only thing holding back the true power of the Metyr. Good lord, there's so much blood on the floor you would think we made it to Mohg Dynasty already. Okay, now we can go to Leyndell. I'm gonna do something different for the Draconic Tree Sentinel, as in, I'm going to get Poison Mist and see if the cheese still works. This is different for me, because I've never done the cheese before, but I think it'll be funny to do this and use poison as the material. This is what this boss gets for being an exception to the field boss rule. From what I remember, you just go to the fog gate and quit out to set it up. Okay, so far so good. Now let's just poison it and see how it goes. I'll have to be a little closer than that. There we go. It still works. Now all we have to do is wait and reapply as needed. That was very uneventful, but it was a good way to use the poison material. After 2 very long and boring boss fights, I'm ready for a change of pace. So after this, I'm going to do a boss rush in Leyndell where the fights are much faster paced. I have to take a quick stop back at the Albinoric village to get the crystal sword. We'll be using that next. After upgrading it, I went on an avatar killing spree to collect some crystal tears for my physic. That'll net us a decent amount of souls to buff up our stats a bit before clearing out Leyndell. Once again, I think the material of the crystal sword is pretty self-explanatory, but I'll put it up on the screen anyway. The gold-free fight was easy with the crystal sword. The rolling attack is great for poking him in between his combos. Eventually, those small pokes will add up, and you'll get a stagger. I feel like the straight sword's moveset flows very naturally in this fight. Every time he swings his axe, there's a break that happens to leave just enough time for a quick combo before rolling out of the way. Once I claim the levels from this fight, I'm going to take a quick break from the boss rush to get a few NPC quests done. You never know when you want to go to the DLC. So I'll get Vari's done just so we have the option to fight Mohg early. The quest isn't truly done until we use the Pureblood Knight's medal right in front of his face. Alright, now we have a grace here so we can head back above and do Dung Eater's quest. This means we have to make a Boggart to move to his next location as well. I need both of them for this. With the Seedbed Curse in our inventory, we can get the key to free him from his cell. And if we did everything right, Boggart will have been defiled in a chair that becomes his final resting place. And we make things even worse when we defile his resting place to loot his corpse. I hate doing this, I really do, but I can't resist the iron ball. Oh yeah, and Dung Eater's here too. I sure hope a giant crab doesn't interfere in our honorable 1v1. That's all the quests we'll be doing for now. We have our next weapon from Morgott. The description tells us that the Sword of Milos is made out of Milos' backbone. It's no wonder the Dung Eater would take to a cursed sword like this one. Like the Dung Eater himself, we can use the special skill to cast a debuff on our enemies. In addition to this, it also has bleed buildup, which is always a plus. For Morgott, I had the same problem as earlier with the staggers. I get tempted by his low poise and run right into his combos. Instead of resisting the temptation, I embrace it, and bring the Stone Barb cracked tier to do even more poise damage to him. It may look like I got greedy to the untrained eye, but this was actually the result of a carefully calculated plan to stagger him efficiently. As a bad omen for the omen, I let out one last shriek to signal his impending defeat, stealing the last bit of his life force to bolster my own power. The omen hunt is not over yet. It's time to make our way back to the Mohg dynasty to challenge Mohg and potentially find some precious weapon materials in the Land of Shadow. Thankfully, if you go to the mountaintops and forget to talk to Yura like I did, you can still get invaded by Eleonora and get the Purifying Tier. From here, we'll upgrade the iron balls we got earlier and start preparing them for the Lord of Blood. Since this is a fist weapon, it would benefit a lot from the successive attack boost of the winged sword insignia, so we'll get that first and foremost. With this, any NPC invader in our way will fall within seconds. So if we really want to know if our weapon is ready for Mohg, we'll need to use the lobster method to test its effectiveness. It already takes figurative balls of iron to approach a lobster, but killing it is a whole different story. You'll need literal iron balls for that. In Elden Ring, a good rule of thumb is if you can kill a lobster without a problem, your weapon is good to go. That's not why I came all the way down to the Shunning Grounds, though. I came here to get the Lord of Blood's Exaltation from the Catacombs boss. This will stack with the White Mask's attack boosting effect from blood loss. And it goes both ways. As long as something bleeds, the mask will be sated. Preferably, that something will be Mohg, so I've brought along blood grease to buff my weapon. The first attempt is just for testing the waters a bit. I'm not too worried about dying, I just want to get a good idea of how long it takes to stagger him so I can plan around it. The iron balls have great stagger potential with the heavy attack combo, and on top of that, the DPS will be very high if we manage to activate all our buffs. I also like to use jump attacks for the same reason. They also have the additional benefit of evasiveness since your character will have their head down at the end of the animation. After trying this a few times, I switched to the blood-infused iron ball since it won't be sacrificing a significant amount of our physical damage. I also ran out of blood grease and didn't feel like getting more. This made the fight go by a lot faster now that our bleed buildup was better. I started popping the physic in Phase 1 to get the poise damage bonus since it often went to waste in Phase 2 while he was flying around. This ended up paying off. When it was time for him to knee heal, I didn't have to waste any time drinking the physic and could start pummeling him right away. The DPS of the iron balls was so good that it cancelled out most of the health he got back from it, even getting him to bleed out at the last second. Any minute now he would either get staggered or bleed out again, so I had to keep up the pressure, even if I could only take one more hit. Standing in front of him while he's casting Blood Boon may have been too reckless, but you need to be a little ballsy if you want to make it out here in the lands between. Mohg will give us a very generous amount of souls that can be put towards getting Vigor to the soft cap, leaving us some room to level up a couple other stats. Now then, I'd like to head to Castle Sol and open up the rest of the overworld. I want to use ice as the next weapon material. This is an interesting one because it comes in the forms of spells and a rapier. After collecting a couple of ice spells to try, I go to the King's Realm ruins to pick up the Frozen Needle after the boss fight. From here, we'll go to Caelid to fight the first commander and start Millicent's quest. Also, I need to level up my intelligence just a tad to wield the meteorite staff. Our current setup is of too low intelligence to use Zamor Ice Storm, so pelting him with icicles will have to do for now. Once we have the needle, we can progress Millicent's questline as much as we can for now. To progress it further, we'll have to challenge Niall for his half of the secret medallion. But first, we'll need to prepare. We'll upgrade our melee weapon, then work on our intelligence some more so we can use Zamor Ice Storm. We'll have to travel around the map quite a bit for this. First going underground to get Marika's Scar Seal, then getting the Intelligence Knot tier in Liurnia. We can also get Renala's Hat for another boost to intelligence, and once that's done, we'll get the Graven Skull Talisman to boost the damage of the spell itself. Now that our intelligence is slightly higher, the Demi-Human Queen's Staff is probably going to start outclassing our Meteorite Staff. Alright, it took quite a bit of preparation, but we're finally ready to go to Castle Sol. In theory, Zamor Ice Storm is a good tool to clear out his minions, but it didn't work out how I imagined it would in my head. So all that preparation may have been a waste, but it's okay. I think the Frozen Needle deserves a chance to shine too. In order to deal with the minions, I use the Impaling Thrust skill to stun them to death one by one. Once it's just me and the boss, I can finally test out the projectile attack, although it's best to use this one sparingly in this fight. Niall is a lot faster than he seems, and his AoE attacks are also a lot larger than they seem. While it may seem counterproductive to fight an ice boss with ice, he actually is not immune to frost, so don't let him trick you. I was able to inflict frostbite on him several times, with a final injection of the needle freezing him to death. I didn't do all that work accommodating a magic build for nothing. For now, we're sticking with sorcery, and using plain magic as our next material. I know it isn't that simple in Elden Ring since magic in this game is derived from glintstone, the cosmos, the primeval current, and all that jazz. But for the sake of the challenge, I'll consider the material of all the shiny blue projectiles magic and call it a day. I'm not worried about any other NPC quests, so I might as well head towards the fire giant to burn the Erdtree. I think magic is a good material to use here. This fight isn't easy enough for it to feel like a waste, but also not difficult enough for our low FP setup to be much of a problem. I've got my DPS machine Carian Slicer, and a couple of ranged options to try whenever I feel like mixing it up. Even with 60 vigor, I found myself getting one-shot by fireballs quite often, and I also may have taken the low FP situation too lightly. After a few more frustrating failures, I decided that I needed a giant killer to add to my spell lineup. If we finish her quest, Sellen has just the right spell for this. Sharp Spiral is the giant killer. You could probably beat Fire Giant blindfolded with this. I'll be saving that one for the second phase, and using Carian Slicer to save FP on the first phase. He's also in a better position in this phase. When his whole body is to the ground, each spiral goes through him multiple times and absolutely shreds him to pieces. As long as you lock on, you can mindlessly fire those off until you run out of FP, then rinse and repeat. If you have a hatred for this boss in particular, this spell is for you. And now we finally venture into the DLC to hunt for some materials. I've been thinking about what I want to use, and for some reason kept going back to pots. Naturally, this led me to dung, which is a unique material in its own right that requires a pot as a vessel before it can be used as a weapon. Unfortunately, you can't keep actual pieces of dung in your pocket and throw it at people like you can in Dark Souls, so maybe the material should be whatever the pot is made of. But then again, the pot ultimately is broken once it connects, so at the very least, we're attacking them with both the pot and its contents, so I think it counts. I have a lot of options as far as bosses go, so I need to think about who I'm going to throw my poop pots at. After much deliberation, I settled on a boss that would be a good use of our fetid pots, because if anyone deserves this shit, it's the Godskin Duo. The damage from the poison wasn't really what I was hoping for, but at least the hefty pots are big enough to hit them both at the same time. The problem is my pots are very limited, and as they build up resistance, I start to wonder if I even have enough to do this fight. A few attempts, and it was clear that this was not worth the effort, so I switched materials. From one joke material to another, the next thing I try is the Giant's Red Braid, aka hair. Besides the Flame Dance skill, the damage here was not very good. I really wanted to be funny and use the basic attacks instead of relying on the skill that actually does damage, but apparently I don't have enough patience to fight this boss with a handicap. I would rather fight Malenia with my fists than use an even slightly inconvenient weapon on the Godskin Duo. So I switched materials a third and final time, this time killing the Blackblade Kindred in the Dragon Barrow for the Gargoyle's Black Blade. Originally, the entire sword was made of bronze, but the blade, the part we attack with, has been mended with blackened corpse wax after being broken, so the material is corpse wax. This weapon has a unique skill that uses the so-called power of corpse wax to shoot a Destined Death-like projectile. However, it's a little different than Destined Death itself. It's kind of like a mix between it and Black Flame. Like Destined Death, it saps life and does holy damage, however, it doesn't temporarily decrease HP. Regardless, it worked like a charm against the Godskin Duo and made the fight more tolerable overall. Since we now have all the smithing stone bell bearings, I won't show upgrades anymore, as you can assume all of my weapons will be max or near max level. I'm taking a break from main storyline bosses now to do a little cleanup in the base game before I start taking on any DLC bosses. The first place I want to go is the Haligtree, but that means we need to fight Loretta again, so we need a second stone weapon for her. The one I chose is the stone-sheathed sword you can get from one of 3 altars in the Land of Shadow. Of course, this iteration of the sword is nothing special, since you're supposed to transform it into either the Sword of Light or Darkness. I guess it is pretty interesting that it does strike damage as a straight sword, but Loretta doesn't have a weakness to strike, so it might as well be doing the standard damage type. The damage is also very mediocre, but at least it has square off on it, which can easily break her stance. Haligtree Loretta actually took me a few tries. Her magic is quite brutal, even with the Spelldrake Talisman +2. But now that she's out of the way, we can continue through the level. I'll pick up Marika's Soreseal first, in case we need the extra stats in the future. And now that I can no longer delay the evil deeds I must perform, it's time for our final encounter with Millicent. With the help of her sister Mary, we kill her in cold blood so that she may follow in the steps of her mother, whether she likes it or not. It can be kinda tricky to keep Mary alive with a weaker weapon, but she can bleed Millicent out with her scythe. After that happens, try to be super aggressive against Millicent, since she'll likely be low on health at that point. Killing her gives us her prosthesis. Wearing it will not only give us 5 more dexterity, but it also boosts consecutive attacks and will stack with both versions of the sword insignia. The only thing left at this point is the fight with Malenia, which will be done with a commitment to hair as the weapon material. No taking it back this time. It's actually not such a bad weapon against Malenia. She's already weaker to fire, so even when she's standing in the water, it'll do yellow damage, which was not the case for the Godskin Duo. Phase 1 is simple enough. I don't have many problems with this phase since she's so passive, but phase 2 is a little more difficult because I was also being passive, so I had trouble keeping up with her aggression in this phase. I had been doing a hit and run strategy since the whip isn't going to stagger her, but in phase 2 this doesn't work as well because she can go straight into Waterfowl Dance to close the distance I just created. Clearly, I need to come up with a different strategy. This is where the Flame Dance skill comes into play. Once the first hit connects, she can't escape it, and we get a nice little combo from it, not to mention a free knockdown. You don't have to worry about openings as much in the first phase. I honestly was just throwing this out in the neutral when it looked like she was about to walk into it. It also hits from mid-range, so don't be scared to use it as soon as she starts approaching you. As long as she isn't attacking, yours should come out faster. I was surprised that I got a stagger at all, so I messed up the punish, but luckily, it still interrupted the move she did after her hyper armor. Now for phase 2. I always start with Flame Dance the moment the flower begins to fade. It's better to be early than late, even if you take a little damage, because being late could let her wake up into a waterfowl, which she loves to do in this phase. In this phase, we'll need to be much more attentive to what she's doing and only use the skill as a punish. Trying to use it in the neutral here will only get us killed. Aside from the blooms, the only other time I went for Flame Dance was immediately after she does her Rot Geyser. Be warned that this is not a true punish unless you are very fast. She can and will go straight into Waterfowl from this. The risk is not without reward though, so if you're feeling daring, just go for it. It works more than you'd think. Using the last of her strength, Malenia danced a final time as she embraced her death, knowing full well that she is but a moth, being led into the flame. Malenia's remembrance can be used for 2 unique weapon materials, if we ever need them, but for now, I'll be continuing with Ronnie's quest and picking up a different material as I do so. The Pest's Glaive dropped from Pests is said to be made of a sharpened shell, which we'll assume is made of chitin, but just calling the material shell works too. When you're like level 100, it's easy to get carried away on bosses like Astel. I refused to let go of R1 and wondered why I kept getting tossed in the air like a beanbag. Still, my relentless aggression paid off, and now we can get the weapon material we came here for. Just as the Moonlight Greatsword is a tradition in the games themselves, it's a tradition for me to use Moonlight as a material in this challenge, so I'll make sure to use this on something later on. For now, I'm getting a second iron weapon so I can fight Sewer Mohg and get to Deeproot Depths without having to fight the gargoyles. I chose the battle hammer that you can get from the duelist in Leyndell. This fight went the same way as before, just much easier since there's no second phase. so I don't have much to say about this one. Before we descend into the depths, we need another weapon. I picked up the Carian thrusting shield off camera because I wasn't expecting to use it, but according to the description, this weapon is made of silver, and that's a material we haven't used yet. This will be interesting for me because I haven't tried out the thrusting shield class yet. As a shield, it retains the ability to block oncoming hits with an attack, but of course that uses a lot of stamina, so you have to be careful not to get your stance broken. On the other hand, this shield is meant to be a weapon, so unlike a typical shield, if you get a stance break of your own, you can perform a critical hit with it. After this fight, I wasn't ready to let go of the thrusting shield just yet, so I decided to use it against another mini-boss to get the next weapon. The Black Jail Knight was very fun to duel with the thrusting shield. I really like how up-in-your-face the moveset feels. It's good for trading with his greatsword when neither side wants to let up on their combo. Keep an eye on your stamina, and you should be fine, even if the shield absorbs a hit or two from him. When he's defeated, he drops the Greatsword of Solitude that he wields. It's a standard steel greatsword, aside from its unique skill. However, I won't be using that, because I'd consider the Arc of Light a separate material. Since we have a weapon, we can return to the Deeproot Depths to challenge Fortisax. This fight is pretty straightforward. It's not one that I typically have an issue with. One thing I always notice though is Fortisax is a lot harder to stagger than any of the other dragon bosses. I didn't get a single one, even with a greatsword. It's probably because I tend to focus on the legs instead of the head. Regardless, this fight wasn't really a problem, despite the fact that I almost killed myself with my recklessness. Also, I think this fight is still glitched because the Phase 2 music never started, and Fortisax never flew up into the air for the phase transition either. With that out of the way, we have that remembrance for later, but first, I want to use Morgott's remembrance to make his cursed sword. Reading the description will give us some info about the composition of the sword. The blade is literally made out of his own cursed blood, something he would only unseal as a last resort. Like all things related to blood, this weapon scales off of Arcane and needs 17 points of Arcane to wield, so we need to go to Rellana and dump our stats into Dex and Arcane. From here, we'll proceed with the Maliketh fight, which will be the last thing we do in base game besides the final area. The first phase can be a bit of a struggle for me since I like to spam and roll into every single attack. But phase 2 feels a lot more like a typical Souls beast boss with how his attacks are dodged. Besides the obvious telegraphed explosions, you can stay under or behind him to make most of his attacks whiff. I was getting completely destroyed by him, so I broke the Cloanne cosplay to wear some better armor. Jump attacks are always a good idea if you're looking to stagger something, so I stuck with those for the first phase, and followed up with the Cursed Blood Slice, hoping to trigger bleed. The bleed buildup isn't ridiculously high on this sword, so I maybe got him to bleed out once in the whole fight, but he's a glass cannon anyway, so big bursts of damage aren't really necessary to make quick progress on his health bar. Phase 2 was very quick with the stance breaking tier applied. His poise is low as it is, so you can practically riposte him straight into another stagger. I'm not particularly concerned about where my levels go at this point. I can always change them with Rellana if I need to. And I'll be doing just that. This time, let's swap to a faith build so we can use some incantations. The Godslayer seal should be the best one for our current faith level, so we'll backtrack to Stormveil to pick that up. Using Gowry's Bellbearing, we'll buy Pest Threads from the Twin Maidens. We already have the Phlox Canvas Talisman, so we'll get the Faithful's version from the Celia Tunnel. Now we're ready to cast Pest Threads, making Silk the next weapon material. Or at least that's what I assume the threads to be made of. Alright, let's pop that hidden tier and let it rip. Sorry, had to get that out of my system. But you gotta admit, that wasn't half bad for not using my brain. Okay, we fight seriously now. Not to be rude, but you're supposed to be dead. Well, in that case, if you get to finish your grab when you're dead, it's only fair I still get my rewards when I'm dead. Thankfully, we don't have to fight that again, so let's switch our stats with Rellana so we can use our next weapon, the Dark Moon Greatsword. As Elden Ring's iteration of the Moonlight Greatsword, it is, of course, made of moonlight itself. Moonlight is a tangible material in the Souls games. Its power can be directly harnessed to create the blade of a sword, and in this version, which draws from the power of Ranni's Cold Moon, is no exception. Rellana is without a doubt familiar with this sword. It represents the legacy she left behind when she chose to serve Messmer. She knows the ins and outs of its abilities, and responds in kind to our assailment of moonlight beams. After a couple failed attempts, I was starting to get used to her moveset again. Once again, relying on stance breaking was a good strategy, and if done right, it can skip the second phase completely. I usually don't do this because I enjoy this fight. I mean, why bother doing a fight if you're not actually playing the game, right? It seems I got a little carried away. Every time I'm using one of the big bonk weapons, it brings me back to my roots as a strength user. What happened to me? I can't remember anything. I feel like I was just taken over by some primal being. Oh well, might as well move on then and get our next weapon material. Necromancer Gaius surrenders his weapon to us easily enough. The family heads on this flail are each made of copper. However, they can also release wrathful spirits that are similar to Ghost Flame spells. But wouldn't spirits be their own separate material? I'll stick with a standard moveset for bosses just in case. But we can still test out Familial Rancor against regular enemies. I was really surprised at how good this skill is. It's doing way more damage than Ghost Flame spells for far less stat investment. This is potentially an oversight, but it doesn't cost any stamina to use this, so you can spam it just like the good old days of DS1. Alright, I've had my fill of spamming, so we'll be more honorable against the Dancing Lion. I've never used a flail at all, so I didn't really know what to expect, but I was pleasantly surprised by its moveset. It's fun to swing it around aimlessly and hear the chains rattling around, but it's also practical since it works really well with consecutive attack talismans. I know you can't parry flails, but I didn't know you could riposte with them. I kinda assumed they would be identical to whips, but it turns out they're much more unique than I thought. As usual, this fight was very enjoyable. Not too difficult, but not too much of a pushover either. I don't know if I'll end up needing rewards from this or Rellana, but either way, as long as I had fun, it doesn't really matter. That thing I said about being done with spamming, well, it was a lie. It's just too much fun to exploit the NPC AI with this skill. For once, I can be the one cackling evilly as I watch them panic roll for their lives. I don't have any plans to fight Bale in this run, but I do want to go to the Jagged Peak for the Shadow Fragment. And we might as well drop into Cerulean Coast from here so we can ring the bell in the First Finger Ruins. From here, we'll go back to Shadow Keep and clear it out normally. Besides, we have a lot of cleaning up to do. The less, the better. This time I'm going to clear out as many of Miquella's followers as I can. I was extra careful with Freya this time and even cleared out all the Fire Knights in the vicinity, just so I could have more room to space her out and spam my floating skulls. Ansbach demotes the Needle Knight to the Pincushion Knight, and with that, we've progressed his quest as far as we can until the final area. Now, to continue further into the keep to ring the second bell. Before I challenge the dreaded Mother of Fingers, I have to get a new weapon. The Cipher Pata is literally made of a cipher, a language of light spoken by the two fingers. I would consider this to be unique material that's different even from the holy essence found in incantations, since only 2 weapons are made from this special cipher. Metyr doesn't appreciate the use of her children's words against her. She seemed to be hitting even harder than usual. Apparently my Shadow Blessing isn't high enough to not die in 2 hits. Of course I am wearing light armor, but that hasn't been a problem up to this point. Clearly, I need to get better at dodging against Metyr. Otherwise, there's no point in sacrificing poise and defense for a light roll. I was already getting fed up with her, so I caved and decided to fight Gaius with the Cipher Pata instead. At least fighting him will give us plenty of shadow fragments for Metyr. Being an Albinoric, he's weak against holy damage, and that's all this weapon has, unfortunately for him. Once I got knocked off my mount, I started to prioritize jump attacks. For this reason, I brought the Claw Talisman and the Raptor's Feathers to boost them. Originally, that was planned for Metyr, but my setup had to be repurposed. Aside from the usual annoying charge attack spam, this fight went way better than I expected it to. It was definitely the easiest Gaius fight I've ever had, not that I've fought him that many times. With a Shadow Tree Blessing of 14, we should be much better off for Metyr. but now that we've used our cipher material already, we'll have to find something new before our rematch. After scanning through the exhaustive list of materials I made for myself, I settled on one that was easy to obtain. But before I do that, I need to collect a few extra things to make the weapon even more powerful. First is the Godfrey icon to boost charge skills, then we can ignore the Crucible Knight in Deeproot Depths and swipe her armor from inside a tree. By now, you may have figured out what material I'm thinking of. Primordial Gold, the signature metal of the Crucible. Like I mentioned in the intro, Elden Ring has so many materials that even gold comes in different forms in this game. We have Primordial Gold, Unalloyed Gold, but also your run-of-the-mill gold. Primordial Gold, known for its reddish hue, contains the power of the Crucible, and all Crucible Knights can unleash this power through the special abilities of their weapons. The Crucible Knight armor will boost the power of aspect of the Crucible skills as well, not just the incantations. Once we best Devonia, we can claim Devonia's Hammer, my new weapon of choice for Metyr. Now to carry out my extremely sophisticated plan for Metyr. Who needs patience when you can stagger her in 2 heavy attacks? Not a single light attack was used in this fight. I only went for big hits here because I hate this fight, and unlike Rellana, I do want to skip the second phase and make sure she dies before she has time to do her laser move. If it were up to me, I wouldn't be fighting her in this run at all, but she's guarding a really cool weapon that I want to use. This time, the fight actually went according to my plan. With a tier to boost my holy damage, the Godfrey icon to boost charge skills, and all the other boosts I had on, Devonia's Vortex was taking out her health in massive chunks. It's easy to loop staggers with a colossal weapon, and we can use that opening to hit her with a fully charged Vortex. The second she tries something funny, I bring down the Hammer of the Crucible. I nearly brought myself down in the process, almost ruining such a good run, but this time, I was able to calm the beast I had summoned from the powers of the Crucible. Now that the Mother of Fingers has fled, we can return to claim the Sword of Night from Yolan after giving her the Iris of Occultation. We've used Primordial Gold, but what about just plain old regular gold? My first choice would have been the Envoy's Greathorn, but I ended up getting the Longhorn to drop in the process of farming for it. And this farm was getting really annoying to do, so I settled for that one instead. The Envoy's Longhorn is a golden musical instrument that has been repurposed into a weapon. It also can blow bubbles, and as funny as it is to blow bubbles at demigods, I'm not going to be relying on the bubbles this time around. Despite this, I'm still wearing the hat because it just feels wrong without it. As I hinted, we will be facing a demigod next, specifically Messmer the Impaler. Great hammers in general are really good for Messmer. Like most humanoid enemies, his stance can be broken in 3 charged heavy attacks or so. I was doing okay on the first attempt, but I definitely need to brush up on my dodge timings. Sometimes having the knowledge that he's 1 hit away from a stagger only hurts you and makes you play worse. I don't know what my plan was here. I probably could have healed here and would have been fine, but instead I decided to try my luck with the snakes. We'll get him next time. We've got a good rhythm going with our staggers, and if he's close to another one before the snake attack this time, I'm just gonna go for it. That's interesting. Even if you cancel it, the snakes keep going. Good thing we can take advantage of our iframes here. Messmer, stop running away from me. Come on, you don't want to disappoint your mother again, do you? Took you long enough. Now give me that kindling. Speaking of kindling, I think I already have an idea of what I want to use for Romina. When in doubt and you see a giant bug, kill it with fire. We technically haven't used pure fire as a material yet. Sure, we used hair imbued with fire, but hair is still hair even if it's on fire, right? This material is self-explanatory, so we'll keep it simple and stick to a few basic flame incantations. At the very least, we'll need 1 close range option and 1 long range option, then we're all set. Being a creature of rot, Romina already has a natural aversion to fire, but we can exploit this further by stacking an ungodly amount of buffs. We have the Fire Scorpion charm as well as 2 crystal tiers in our physic to boost fire damage. The Fire Shrouding tier will boost our damage directly, while the Oil Soaked tier will drench her in oil when she gets close to us and make her more vulnerable to fire damage. I won't pretend I didn't still die to her despite having all these advantages, but I will say things got a lot easier when I stopped trying to fight from afar and instead started spamming Catch Flame. My favorite thing about this spell is that you can jump while casting it, and since jumping is generally a good way to dodge in this fight, it worked out perfectly. That and rolling into her. There are a lot of things that will miss if you get close enough, like the grab for instance. I was able to stagger her with just catch flame. Then, after that, I backed off and let her transform in peace to not repeat the mistakes I made earlier. Because the fight has been going so smoothly, we can afford to get a little flashy for the finisher. For this next fight, I've had it planned out since the very beginning. Since this is a PvP style fight, we have to employ PvP style strategies. After getting our lightning material, we need to prepare to set up our cheese. First, we need to go back to Rellana and dump all of our levels into Faith. We'll get the Death Knight set from the Darklight Catacombs to enhance our lightning spells. Unfortunately, I missed out on the Gravelstone seal, so this will have to do. Here is the cheesy part. We need to get Endure, then we can slap it on a dagger. We'll keep that in our main hand and cast lightning with the other hand. Now we use it to endure through anything and watch the carnage that ensues. You know what? Let's just wait for Ansbach. There you go, she's almost dead. Just one more bleed. Come on, Ansbach, you've got this in the bag. Wait, what are you doing? Don't run away! Aggress her, you fool! Ansbach, please don't do this to me. You know I'd help you if I could. Do you think I like running away like a helpless host? I've been underestimating how much hyper armor Fortisax's spears have on their own. You don't really need Endure for this one. All jokes aside, Ansbach more than made up for the little mishap from earlier. In fact, he carried so hard I'd even say the main material I used was the power of friendship. Before we finish with the DLC, I am going to fight one more optional boss just so I can finish collecting all the shadow fragments. For this, I'll still be using spells. Only this time I'm going back to sorcery to use gravity spells. Unlike the other games, we don't need to knock something off a ledge to use gravity as a weapon. In Elden Ring, gravity can be manipulated with sorcery. Basically, any of the purple spells are made of gravity, or gravitational forces. I was careful to only use the ones that are pure gravitational force, rather than something like Rock Sling that uses gravity to propel rocks from the earth, as that would technically be a different material. After we switch to a pure intelligence build with Rellana, we can duplicate her remembrance to make the Carian Regal Scepter. We don't have a crazy amount of FP, so I would rather use this over Lusat's staff. We're also wielding the Meteorite staff in our offhand for a boost to gravity sorceries, and with this, we're ready to challenge a boss. Jori was honestly pretty annoying this time around. It's not even a particularly difficult boss, I just kept going for the big damage with fully charged spells and getting myself killed. Collapsing stars is pretty useful for the teleporting part. I learned that even if he teleports away, the projectiles will still follow him to his new location, saving you the trouble of having to cast again. I'm not going much deeper into the Abyssal Woods in this run. I do enjoy the Midra fight, but this game is very long as it is, so I'm not going to be fighting every boss this time, especially if I don't need anything from the fight. And now, we make one last adjustment to our stats with Rellana, this time putting as much as we can towards dexterity. Our next material will be from the Sword of Night we picked up earlier. This sword is said to be made of a semi-corporeal, all-consuming black, so we'll just call this material Darkness, but I'd even say that in this game, Night itself is a material. A fitting weapon to challenge Miquella's Lord of Light. But why does it feel so weak? Oh, that's right, silly me, I forgot to upgrade it. Okay, that didn't count. This is the real first attempt. Now that it's actually upgraded, the damage is looking good. Initially, I thought it would be hard to find openings to use the Witching Hour skill, but as long as you're using the uncharged version, there are many opportunities to use it at the end of his combos. It also works great with Millicent's prosthesis, since it will always give us a multi-hit combo of our own. This went a lot better than I expected. I knew I wouldn't be able to do it in 1 or even 2 tries, but by the second try, I was already starting to make some decent progress. While I'm not relying on it much, this weapon does have bleed buildup, which typically triggers around the end of the first phase, if you've been punishing consistently. Usually I have a whole essay of rambling about how terrible my experience with this fight went, but this time, it actually took me less time to beat Consort Radahn than base game Radahn. Maybe the Sword of Night is just a good weapon for this, but one thing that has helped me is watching other people do this fight. One example is I would often see people crouching to avoid this move, so I started to do that myself. Over time I've picked up little things from others that have helped me to get better at this fight. Kind of like how you learned about secrets in Super Mario World from watching an older relative play. With this, we lead the god and his consort into an eternal night. Ansbach's quest is done. The last step is to loot his corpse and take his weapon. We'll focus on that in a bit, but for now, we have to figure out what material we're going to use against Gideon. Though it has failed me before, I think that Gideon is even more deserving of the dung treatment than the Godskin Duo ever was. This time, I'm bringing in different flavors for him to try. We have bloody stool and poisonous stool, and I guess some flies as well. After a very fun game of dodge the glintstone comets, we finally have our opening to attack when he goes for a Scarlet Aeonia. I start with the poison pots, and after he uses an Estus, I start using the swarm pots. He does build up resistance quickly, and will need more than one hefty pot to be poisoned once you use enough. But thankfully by then the damage from the pot itself was enough to kill him. As for Godfrey, we already used crystal, so we can simply get the rotten crystal sword from a chest near the inner wall side of Grace. It's basically identical to the crystal sword. I believe it does slightly less physical and magic damage, but this is a fair trade since it inflicts scarlet rot. Godfrey's not particularly resistant to rot, but that might be a bad thing for me since it encourages greed. The same greedy habits reared their ugly head in the second phase. I was out of stamina, but I was sure that he was about to be staggered, so what's the harm in just one more attack? You know me, I don't break my greedy habits. I indulge in them with the stone barb cracked tear. It doesn't last for long, so if I'm not aggressive, it'll go to waste. Once I see him going for a roar, I decide to trade with him since I'm at full health, and this pays off when he gets inflicted with Scarlet Rot again, and the passive damage is what kills him in the end. Last but not least, we'll be paying homage to our good friend Ansbach by using his obsidian lamina to slay a god, as he would have wanted. While I could technically change materials for Elden Beast since it's a separate boss, I want to use the scythe to its full potential and see what it can do. Dynastic sickle play is a good spacing tool if you know how to use it, but even if you don't, it's still a lot of fun to test out and play around with. It works a lot better against a humanoid enemy like Radahn, but might be a little awkward against the Elden Beast. Instead, we'll rely on regular light attack combos during these big openings so we can let our consecutive attack boosts kick in. The Elden Beast portion of the fight was going pretty well with the scythe. I even managed to stagger it fairly early on. All was going well, at least until I got crucified. It happens to the best of us. We're already all out of heals, so we might as well finish it in style. I wish I had more chances to do the full combo during the fight itself, but using it to gloat is fine too. And with this, the Elden Ring version of the Material Challenge is complete. Thank you all for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed watching me scavenge the Lands Between for all the unique materials it has to offer. A lot of materials went unclaimed in this run. Believe me, I had a whole list of uncrossed items. I didn't have time to do an all-boss run, sadly, but I'm still satisfied with how the video turned out overall. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more challenges for the Soul series, feel free to check out my channel to see even more themed runs. You can even suggest an idea for the next video if you want. I hope you had fun, and I'll see you next time.